my name is Natalie Leroux. I am the quantitative literacy lead in CTAC. So I'm responsible for all the, well, supposedly for all the QL related tests that we develop in CTAC. Well, Center for Educational Testing for Access and Placement. I started at UCT 2.5 years ago, so not 5 minutes like Sanet. I've been around for about 2.5 years. But before that, I worked at the HSRC in Cape Town and also in Pretoria and at the University of the Free State. So why am I telling you about this information? I'm also a research psychologist, and my research interest or my specialty field is psychometrics, looking at and measurement theory, looking at the data and what the data says. So I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator, I didn't study education, I studied psychology. So when it comes to the curriculum and curriculum development, that is not my specialty, but I can tell you everything about data, I can tell you everything about what the results say, what it means. So that's what my claim to fame. So now, because I like data, I'm going to give you an overview of the national 2016 intake. So this is just, firstly, let me say I'm going to give you, the first presentation is going to be in 2 sections. So I'll first give you an idea of the national profile of all the students that wrote the NBT in 2016. And then I'm going to give you a subset for the Western Cape. So the Western Cape and data is going to be taken from that subset. So to answer your question, when you ask, do everybody write the same test? They all write the same test. Today happens to be a national session, so all across the country, everybody is writing the same test, the AQL and the QL test. And then we have different forms of the AQL and the MAT test. So they don't all write the exact same test, but psychometrically they have been linked and equated, which what it means is that they are on all the same scale. So not some students writing an apple or a banana, they're all writing the same test and it's equated. So if someone wrote a test today and they get a certain score, it will be comparable to someone that writes a test in September. So they all write the same test. Yeah. So let me move on. So this is the national profile. So these are all the students that wrote tests that they are now in their first year at university. So they wrote it they wrote it 2 years ago, because the students that are registered now, it's not in the public domain yet. So I'm giving you 2 years old data, but the profiles don't change that dramatically. So in the 2016 intake, there were 81,666 students that wrote the test nationally for AQL, and then there were 59,000, almost 60,000 that wrote the test, the math test. And the reason for that being lower is that not everybody is required to write maths. So we are not sure how many of these students are at university at the moment, because this is just all the students that wrote the test with the idea of applying to university, technology, or universities of technology. So this is just the applicant data, everybody that wrote the test. And then this is just Janine mentioned this earlier about the benchmarks. And so we have the basic intermediate is then divided up into lower and upper. And we also have different benchmarks for diploma and for degree studies. So what happens is, for the degree studies, we get lecturers from other institutions to come, and then they set the benchmarks, or also called cut scores, because they know what their first-year students require in AL or QL or maths. For the maths, we also get first-year university lecturers, but we also get matric teachers. And we have some that sit on the panels from some schools in the Western Cape as well, but also nationally. So these benchmarks are not set by us, it's set by your peers, but also our peers. So people that are in geography or in language, academic literacy, in subjects, so they are the ones that set the benchmarks. So what it means is that the benchmarks, I've only put up the degree benchmarks, but the diploma and the national certificate benchmarks are considerably lower. And you'll find that in your document that you have in front of you, so you can have a look at that. So what it means, and Janine has mentioned it, that if someone is in the basic category, it doesn't mean that they are not accepted at university. It just means for that particular AL, QL, or MAT that they might need more work or more support, like perhaps an extended degree program or extended curriculum program at the Technikon, or they need it doesn't mean that they will not be selected. Some institutions use the information very differently and variedly. And then the intermediate, we've just broken up into, it's from 68 to 63, so we divided up into two categories, the lower benchmark, 38 to 50, and then 51 to 63. And the reasoning for that is we say that the students in the upper intermediate will probably not need as much support as the person in the intermediate lower. So it's not a, you get 33%, you in the basic, you fail, you're not going to be accepted institution. It just means that the university has to give you more provision or more support. So this is a box and whisker plot for the whole country, 81,000. And so how we divide this up, or how we create the box plot, is this is the minimum score that someone attained in AL, this is the minimum score for QL. And then that's the maximum score with quite a large tail over there, which is what we call outliers, so probably your exceptional students that are getting there. And this is your median, which separates the 50%. So 50% of your students of the cohort that wrote this test lie between, I would say, probably 9 and 44. So this is how we look at it, and it's quite interesting. And this is for the national cohort, so it's a national problem, not just an institution or a university problem. So nationally, the maths is quite low. And so this is just to give you an idea. We've split it up into the benchmark or cut scores, and so there's your AL, your QL, and your MAT. And so this is the national profile. 50% of the students that wrote our test, the NBT test, the maths test, are sitting in the basic category between 0 and 34, I think the maths is. So the benchmarks are also different for AL, QL, and MAT, and I'm not always familiar with the AL or QL, but I'm familiar with the QL because that's what I am familiar with. But you can see that the proficiency for maths, it says that there are only 9% of the ones that wrote the NBT were in the proficiency. So what we are saying, if all these students go to university, it's a small proportion of students that might not need support. So this is just this data put in, no, not the academic data, put in a nice graph so you can see what it looks like. So the AL generally conforms to a normal distribution, so all the scores are, the majority of the scores fall between 40 and 70. The QL, you can see that most of the scores are falling between the 25 and the 40 mark, and then there's a long tail going to the right, which is a right skew distribution. And then in the maths it's even worse because most of the majority of the scores are lying there just above the 20, and then also quite a long tail to the right.